Okay, let's go live to Kevin Rachlin. He's the U.S. Director at the Alliance for Middle East Peace, and he joins us from Arlington, Virginia. Thank you, Kevin, for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
So, with just 2 months to go until Trump's presidency will come to an end after 4 years, what exactly is the purpose of this, foreign policy tour? Will there be any real policy announcements during his visit?
Well, I think we've already seen the first major policy announcement, which is the changing of the labeling policy from goods made inside the West Bank, specifically in West Bank settlements, to being described as made in Israel. And this specifically applies in the announcement around Area C, which is a massive change in U.S. policy. In addition to that, just when we're looking at Israel and Palestine as well, the fact that the Secretary of State has come to a West Bank settlement was really quite unprecedented. It's the first time a sitting Secretary of State has come to the region and come to a settlement inside the West Bank, and it really marks a shift in policy of how the U.S. Looks at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But I think, importantly enough, that this is something that they're trying to do. They're trying to go on this foreign policy tour to kind of do a last round of victories before they're out of office on January 20th. And so that's why you're seeing them visit, the settlements inside the West Bank, to the Golan Heights. They're going to Qatar. There's meeting with Turkey. They're trying to kind of do a last round of foreign policy victories. And I think the visit to Israel is quite significant for them as it goes to the Abraham Accords.
Well, while Netanyahu has congratulated Biden for winning the election, Trump has yet to concede. And Pompeo has even said they are looking forward to a smooth transition into a second Trump administration. How do we expect the conversation about the election to go in private between Pompeo and Netanyahu? Might be a little awkward?
I don't know if it'll be in private. It'll be as awkward. I think there is a general consensus, even privately amongst most Republicans, as well as all foreign dignitaries, that President-elect Biden will become the president on January 20th. And I think the conversation is most likely going to be around what can this outgoing administration do around Iran, and also the questions of what the Secretary of Pompeo may do beyond his term as Secretary of State, if he ends up deciding to run for the Republican ticket in 2024, trying to shore up wins around that point. So I think I think the main conversation will end up being around Iran, with some slight conversation around 2024.
And so, what will happen to Trump's policies now once Joe Biden takes the White House? What will his legacy be, especially regarding Israel and the Middle East?
So I think there's a couple of things that you'll see when it comes to Biden around Trump's legacy inside Israel, inside Palestine. The first, I would say, is when you're looking at the Trump peace plan, that's already a non-starter, and it's kind of been dead on arrival from the moment it was released. And there were some interesting things about that peace plan, but I think the vice president and the president-elect now has made it very clear that he is supporting a two-state solution. I think that's going to be driving a good chunk of his policies. As for the Abraham Accords, I don't see the president-elect actually rolling back any of those deals, and I think he has come out and said that he supports these normalization efforts. But I think it's really critical to kind of underscore, and I think he has done it, as well as his surrogates have underscored, that normalization between the Arab states is not a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and having to redouble efforts to really try to impact that. And then finally, for things like these, the status of settlements under U.S. Policy, I think you'll start to see that shift once the president-elect is sworn in and the Secretary of State, as well as the ambassador to Israel, are selected. I think that so these issues will be very will probably be switched quite quickly, simply because they go against what they view as how to produce a two-state solution.
The Trump administration very quickly cut off communication with the Palestinians and vice versa. And Biden has not yet entered the White House, and he's already reopened that communication with the Palestinian Authority. So what are the next 4 years going to look like in terms of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict specifically?
So I think what you'll see in the first couple of years is there won't be much, top tier diplomacy when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I think you'll see the general, either a high-level surrogate or the president-elect himself going to Israel, visiting with Netanyahu, visiting with President Abbas. But in terms of the real motivation, what's happening on the ground, the president-elect understands the gravity of what he's walking into when it comes to the relationship between the United States and the Palestinians and the Palestinian Authority. And that's going to take a long time to repair some of those relationships. So I think what you'll see is a focus on civil society, growing trust again between the U.S. and the Palestinians, as well as kind of reinforcing this relationship with Israel.
All right, well, we will be following Pompeo's whirlwind trip and also the next 2 months before Biden takes office. Kevin Rachlin, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much for having me.